So today we have a quick video to help you to understand this last LEQ that we have in Module 1 that asks the question, how can specific events or lines of dialogue advance plot, uncover character, or force characters to act? You might recognize this question because it was the same question that you were asked in the pre-assessment to the entire module. And it just so happens to be the same question that you're going to be asked in the post-assessment to the module as well. So it's a pretty important question. So before we try to understand the question, I think we need to understand some terms. The first term that you'll want to understand is an event. An event is an occurrence within a piece of literary text that comprises the plot. They're basically a series of events that make up the plot. Or it's an episode that occurs in informational text that is part of time order sequence. And basically a story or a narrative or even a story about something real like history is made up of a sequence of events. You might have 5 events in a short story. You might have a series of 25 events in something like a novel. You want to understand what dialogue is. This is probably largely a review. In the widest sense, dialogue is simply conversation between characters or speakers in a literary work, referring specifically to the speech of characters in a drama. Or it's the conversation between or among characters in a literary work. Typically, in a story, you're going to see dialogue set off with quotation marks on both sides of it. Pretty easy to pick out. Another term is plot. Plot is the structure of a story. It's the sequence in which the author arranges events in a story. The structure often includes the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. The plot may have a protagonist or main character who is opposed by an antagonist, like you might refer to this as a villain, creating what is called conflict. And again, hopefully that's a review for you. Another term is character trait. Character trait is an adjective that describes a character in a literary text and expresses a specific quality about the character. A word like selfish or industrious or humorous. Remember that you can find out about character traits either directly, and you're told them in the text by the narrator, or indirectly, and you would look at something like dialogue to figure it out, or you would look at a character action to figure it out, or what other characters speak about the character to figure it out. But you have to remember that you figure out character traits in both of those ways. And then the last term that's important to know for this LEQ is character motivation. And character motivation is the reason behind a character's behaviors and actions in a given scene or throughout a story. So now that you know those 5 terms, we need to put this all together to understand the LEQ. The LEQ was, how can specific events or lines of dialogue advance plot, uncover character, or force characters to act? So first we'll focus on specific events. Remember that specific events are occurrences or specific episodes within a story. So have this definition in mind right here and look back at the question. How can occurrences or specific episodes within a story advance plot, uncover character, or force characters to act? That helps me to wrap my mind around it a little bit better. The second part of this is lines of dialogue, and that was probably the easiest one. Remember, that's the conversation between characters set off with quotation marks. So how can specific events or the conversation between characters advance plot, uncover character, or force characters to act? The third part of this is advance the plot. So how can specific events or lines of dialogue advance plot or move the sequence of events in a story forward? How can lines of dialogue or specific events do that? How can they move the sequence of events in a story forward? The fourth component is uncover character or uncover character traits. Remember that uncovering character is revealing qualities about characters like bravery, selfishness, or anger. So again, think about that. How can specific events in the story or lines of dialogue uncover character? And then the fifth part of this question is forcing characters to act. Remember that forcing characters to act is basically becoming their motivation or reason for action. So how can specific events or lines of dialogue become the character's motivation or reason for action? So hopefully looking at it this way helps you to wrap your head around this very complex question. It kind of reminds me, I don't know if you're a fisherman or a fisher person, but when your line gets all tangled sometimes and you go to untangle it and you just can't, and you have to cut it loose. That's a very complex situation. Well, this is a complex question. So let's apply this question to some text. I wanted to use pages 2 and 3 out of chapter 1 of the Giver novel. So I'm just going to take a moment to read through this a little bit. Jonas grinned, remembering the morning that Asher had dashed into the classroom late as usual, arriving breathlessly in the middle of the chanting of the morning anthem. When the class took their seats at the conclusion of the patriotic hymn, Asher remained standing to make his public apology as was required. I apologize for inconveniencing my learning community. Asher ran through the standard apology phrase rapidly, still catching his breath. The instructor in class waited patiently for his explanation. The students had all been grinning because they had listened to Asher's explanations so many times before. And then Asher refers to a plot event. He says, I left home at the correct time, but when I was riding along near the hatchery, the crew was separating some salmon. I guess I just got distraught watching them. So in this case, we have something going on with a plot event here. So look over here. The plot event that Asher describes becomes his reason for something. What does this plot event motivate him to do? Take a second to think about that. What does this plot event of him riding along near the hatchery and noticing that the crew was separating some salmon, what does that motivate him to have to do later on in the story? Again, take a couple seconds to think about it. Well, if you said that the answer was that that plot event caused him to have to apologize, you would be correct. That plot event resulted in him having to apologize to his class. So you can see how that LEQ is at work in this text. I'm going to continue reading, and we're going to look at another part down here. So it says, I apologize to my classmates, Asher concluded. He smoothed his rumpled tunic and sat down. We accept your apology, Asher. The class recited the standard response in unison. Many of the students were biting their lips to keep from laughing. I accept your apology, Asher, the instructor said. He was smiling, and I thank you because once again you have provided an opportunity for a lesson in language. Distraught is too strong an adjective to describe salmon viewing. He turned and wrote distraught on the instructional board. Beside it, he wrote distracted. Jonas, nearing his home now, smiled at the recollection. And then you see the part that I have highlighted here. It says, thinking still as he wheeled his bike into its narrow port beside the door, he realized that frightened was the wrong word to describe his feelings. Now that December was almost here, it was too strong an adjective. So the plot event where Asher apologizes also moves the plot of the novel forward. Do you know how? How does this highlighted text move the plot of the novel forward? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to think about that. Okay, this answer is a little bit harder. Asher's apology results in the instructor telling the difference between two words. Asher uses the word distraught. The instructor says that he should have used the word distracted, that distraught is too strong of an adjective. Jonas realizes that his situation and the way that he's feeling right now about the December ceremony that's coming, frightened is the wrong word. So in this case, this moves the plot forward. Him remembering Asher's apology moves the plot forward because he's able to sort through his feelings and understand that frightened is too strong of an adjective. He feels a different way about that coming ceremony in December. Okay, let's go back to the slideshow. We're going to look at one more example from chapter 3 on page 20, and this example is a little bit easier. So here we have Lily and Jonas, and they are getting to know a new child that their father has brought home. So I'm just going to start reading at the top here. "Oh, look," Lily squealed in delight. "Isn't he cute? Look how tiny he is. He has funny eyes like yours, Jonas." Jonas glared at her. He didn't like it that she had mentioned his eyes. He waited for his father to chastise Lily, but father was busy unstrapping the carrying basket from the back of his bicycle. Jonas walked over to look. So you'll notice here you have lines of dialogue. Okay, so these lines of dialogue reveal something about Lily's character. What do they reveal? She says, "Oh, look, isn't he cute? Look how tiny he is, and he has funny eyes like yours, Jonas." Take a second to try to think of some adjectives that are revealed about Lily's character when she says those words. So I told you this was a little bit easier. If you said words like Lily is rude, Lily is blunt, Lily is unthinking, because really she speaks without thinking a whole lot here, that her comments are going to offend her brother. If you said any of those things, you are definitely in tune with how these lines of dialogue reveal something about Lily's character. So in summary, consider the LEQ. How can specific events or lines of dialogue advance the plot, uncover character, or force characters to act? The first part of this is to look for a significant plot event or line of dialogue in the text, and then you would explain how the plot event and or the line of dialogue moves the plot forward, uncovers character traits, or becomes the reason or motivation for character action. This process will help you to develop meaningful insights about the text you are reading. And this is the end of this tutorial. Thank you for watching.